In a dramatic escalation of economic warfare, President Donald Trump has issued a chilling ultimatum, a staggering 150% tariff on all imports from the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This move, unprecedented in its scope and severity, is explicitly linked to BRICS's efforts to establish an independent financial system, one that could potentially bypass U.S. dollar dominance. Trump claims that BRICS nations are actively working to dismantle the U.S. dollar's global hegemony, seeking to establish a new world order free from American control. He argues that by creating an alternative financial system, BRICS nations aim to undermine the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency, a cornerstone of U.S. economic and geopolitical power. However, this aggressive stance raises critical questions. If BRICS nations pose no real threat to U.S. economic dominance, why would the U.S. resort to such drastic measures? If the U.S. dollar were truly as invincible as Washington claims, why would it be willing to engage in a high-stakes economic war against a group of nations that, individually or collectively, do not pose a direct military threat? The unsettling reality underscores a deeper truth. America is panicking. For over a century, the U.S. dollar has reigned supreme as the uncontested global reserve currency, cementing America's unparalleled power over global trade and finance. This dominance has allowed the U.S. to manipulate global markets, print money without consequence, and impose devastating sanctions on any nation that dares to defy its will. But now, this carefully constructed edifice of U.S. financial hegemony is under threat. BRICS nations are actively challenging this long-standing order, and Trump's extreme response reveals the depth of Washington's anxiety. This is not merely a trade dispute, it's a battle for global financial supremacy, a fight to maintain U.S. dominance in a rapidly changing world. At the very core of America's financial empire lies the petrodollar system. In the 1970s, the U.S. struck a deal with Saudi Arabia to ensure that all global oil transactions would be conducted in U.S. dollars. This agreement artificially inflated the dollar's value, forcing nations worldwide to hold significant reserves of USD, thereby maintaining global demand for the currency. However, the foundations of the petrodollar system are starting to crack. China and Russia have abandoned the dollar for their own currencies, conducting over 90% of their trade in yuan and rubles. India has followed suit, purchasing Russian oil with rupees, effectively cutting the dollar out of energy transactions. Even Saudi Arabia and the UAE, longtime U.S. allies, are exploring alternatives to the dollar, accepting yuan for oil sales in some instances. This is not merely a theoretical shift, it's happening in real time. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, has confirmed a steady decline in the U.S. dollar's share of global reserves. In 2000, the U.S. dollar accounted for over 70% of global reserves, but by 2023, that number had plummeted to just 58%, a trend that continues as more nations seek alternatives. Meanwhile, China's digital yuan is being tested for use in international oil trade, signaling a potential paradigm shift in global finance. If BRICS succeeds in launching an alternative global reserve currency, the consequences for the United States would be nothing short of catastrophic. Washington would lose its most powerful tool of geopolitical leverage, the ability to control global finance through the dominance of the dollar. Without the dollar's central role in international trade, the U.S. would no longer be able to impose sanctions, control capital flows, or manipulate markets as it has done for decades. This would not only weaken U.S. economic influence, but also undermine its ability to project power on the global stage. Trump's 150% tariff threat is not merely a strategic move. It's a desperate gamble to maintain this dwindling dominance. However, this aggressive approach may prove counterproductive. Instead of deterring BRICS, it could accelerate their efforts to break free from U.S. economic influence. The BRICS alliance is expanding, welcoming new members and deepening its economic and political ties. China and Russia are strengthening their bilateral trade, while India is expanding its energy partnerships. Meanwhile, the U.S. is becoming increasingly isolated, facing growing resistance from its traditional allies. The EU, concerned about U.S. sanctions and the potential for economic disruption, is exploring alternatives to the dollar. The rise of BRICS, coupled with growing European independence, is creating a multipolar world where the U.S. no longer holds the dominant position. The era of U.S. economic hegemony is drawing to a close. The question remains, can the U.S. adapt to this changing global landscape, or will it cling to a fading model of dominance, ultimately leading to its own decline? The events we've examined represent more than just economic policy. They signify a potential paradigm shift in the history of global finance. The erosion of the petrodollar system and the rise of alternative financial frameworks could redefine the balance of power for generations to come. We will continue to monitor these developments closely, providing you with in-depth analysis and expert commentary. Join us as we delve deeper into the intricacies of this evolving narrative. Subscribe to stay informed and become part of our community.